Well, good morning. This is Dennis. And today the tape will sort of sound like it's going and stopping because I'm wandering today. Today's tape is about wandering. At least for the first few moments. I started to walk, just kind of picking the best logistical spot to sit for the day and kind of sit and hang out and make the tape. This is the August tape in the series of consciousness. And as I was perceiving, it's kind of chilly up here for September. I know it's the August tape, but you know how I am. When the moment's happening, that's when the tape happens. So up here while I'm hanging out and walking around, it's about 55, 54 degrees, and it's windy. So I'm sort of moving around from rock to rock. Right now I'm on a really beautiful big one. Because they're volcanic rock, they will hold the heat, and so I'm just sort of laying up against the rocks and holding the tape recorder and just basically enjoying. Getting settled in to do the tape is unique in itself. I'm looking at my feet, making sure that my position is going to hold up out here long enough to do this tape and not get tired. And will the rock be warm enough? Because I'm out here in a t-shirt, trying to get a tan at the end of the season. I've noticed that I've peeled, and it's kind of unique. So today I was going through a few different ideas and thoughts, and because I'm always in present time, there was a few things that happened in August that were really spectacular. Summer camp, and I did a trip. I got a free trip from United for traveling so many miles, so it was really great. We got to go to Singapore and Hong Kong and Bali, and that was really fun. And I noticed that being out of a country, and also during the summer camp, there is a tendency to not act differently, but because you're not used to the surroundings, you will act somewhat differently. You will still be who you are, and you will still, follow those things that you are. But I noticed that you have the ability to perceive things that sometimes might just go unperceived. I'm going to sort of walk and talk here now. I'm kind of raw cool down. As I looked at myself, say, traveling through Hong Kong and then traveling through Singapore, I noticed that because of the lack of familiarity, the first thing you do is try to familiarize yourself with that which you best know. Now, the thing that you best know is basically people, because I've discovered that regardless where they come from or who they are or what they're doing, people are people. That's why they call us all people. Even if we can't speak the language, you will attract to yourself the same energy that you're putting out, and vice versa. So if you're maintaining a state of clarity, even though you know you're in a place that is totally unfamiliar to you and the language is unfamiliar to you, you still have the human person, the person bond, which is your beginning point. And then from there you jump to the cultures, see what the culture is like, and then you're able to sort of not fend for yourself, but respond and act. You also begin to notice how closely, because you're paying attention to yourself more, because you're trying to become familiar in unfamiliar surroundings, you get to see more of yourself, which is maybe why we go on vacations, to see who we are and what we're doing and how the rest of the world is in relationship to how we're doing and where we're at. Also, by staying in present time, you become keenly aware of how different things function, like the economy, or the money system, or the arguability, or not the arguability, and yet that also, but the word I was looking for was the negotiating that one has to do in countries such as these, where changing a price is just something that they will do, depending on if you really want it, and things of that nature. It's sort of like, buying a car back in the 60s, where they didn't give you a set price, where you could really work it out and save yourself, and feel like you accomplished something majorly by your escapade into the world. I also noticed basically my effect of God on myself as I traveled through these different parts of the world. And so I guess today will be a little bit about God again. As I noticed what happens for the individual as they become caught up in whatever it is that they're working on. Sometimes that's sales or hustle, the job. Now I noticed that over there in that world, because you see so many probabilities of deals and special sales and the hustle and bustle of just, wow, a lot of people. Just like a lot of people everywhere. More so than in the United States. It's unique to see the experience that you have as your mind is drawn on all of these different things that you think are real, because you're in an environment that you've never been in before. I began to notice that as I was looking at different things, because to make it there was important, and having fun was important. And so you wanted to figure all these things out that you thought mattered, or things that you thought were important. And so by paying more attention to matter, I noticed, or this was the illusion, I thought that I was paying less attention to God. I noticed that my God was becoming the shopping and the looking for bargains, and then wondering if you got a good bargain, and then wondering, oh geez, did I do the right thing on this, or didn't I do the right thing on this, because all those little different things come up for you. Right now I'm moving around again. I found another big giant hot rock. And then besides the bargain hunting, you had hotels that you had to deal with because you were trying to get the best thing there, and airports that you had to deal with. And for the first week as I traveled, all of a sudden it dawned on me that maybe I wasn't paying as much attention to God as I was supposed to be. And then what happened was, because I was more keenly aware of the physical nature, I started blaming myself. Remember, if I can do this, you can do this, and I'm occasionally taking some real duffs in life myself, like everybody else, so that we can put this all together. And as I thought to myself, oh no, I didn't think about God enough, I went into blame, and by allowing myself to really get down on myself, I guess I was just, it's never outside yourself, so I was checking myself out, if all this makes sense. And because I blamed myself for not thinking or being God, I was putting my attention more towards shopping and trying to figure out the culture and everything instead of just being. I blamed myself for about another week. And sure enough, for enough self-blame, I got a sore back, and to the point where I popped the vertebrae out, and it was really uncomfortable. Flying back 16 hours, I had to stay laying down the whole time. So that was quite a unique adventure. And I caught the 3-day measles, which was also real bizarre. And so I've noticed that when anybody, yourself, myself, anybody gets down on themselves, and you don't catch yourself quick enough, it's really amazing how you're willing to kind of beat yourself up. Now, as I was going through these different things, I realized that, you know what, I didn't think less about God or anything like that. It was still happening within my mind. You know, I was still doing, I love you gods, I love you gods, I love you gods as normal as usual. You know, maybe one or two off, but still holding the trim. And yet, even though I was just in perfect harmony, I chose to blame myself. I chose to think of myself as not really good enough. Even though, as you all know, I am worthy. Affirmations just like everybody else, because as we grow, that value of ourself must increase. We must, be able to really make that step within inside of ourselves. And so I'd created this back. I'd created the measles just because I started to blame myself about not being in God enough. And so sometimes we've got to pay attention, as I have, to every word we even say all the time. It's quite unique. It's almost unbelievable how it works after a while. Hold it, I'm sort of at a trail now. I got to decide which way to turn here. Yeah, we're sort of climbing uphill towards this one cliff over here. So my breathing, I'm above 10,000 feet, so my breathing may be a little different, and as you've probably already noticed, my nose occasionally will run, and that's just because it's chilly cold and there's not a whole lot of air. So with this tape, you'll just have to be patient with me. Now, the things that we do, it's sort of like, I want to change subjects now, even though it's what I want to do. I want to change subjects. And I want to talk about, no, I don't want to change subjects. Let me see here. Okay, that was just a small pause. I don't know how windy it is here, so I don't know how it's going to blow on the tape. I'm checking it right now because it is kind of windy, so this is just a wind test. Yeah, I think it'll be okay up here. This is probably the best view, and it's probably the last of the warm rocks. And it's sort of like a lazy boy chair, so that's really comfortable for my back. We've got a phenomenal view. Okay, let's see. Usually I'm not up this high, so we're at about, 12,000 feet or so, and so the air is really thin, and I've definitely noticed that your brain thinks a little differently up here, but it'll be okay. This is just cleaner oxygen. So I guess as I've been observing and listening to parts of the tape myself, as I go along, I've observed that it's a little bit of don't blame yourself for stuff. At least that's what I guess I want to talk about in this tape. I noticed that it's okay, but I've also noticed that sometimes it's a little painful and uncomfortable. I also noticed things dealing with this whole scenario that was kind of far out, and I'd like to share all of that together. I perceive that as a human being, because of our actions, our thoughts, and our feelings and things, we are constantly putting out vibrations. And I look at them like just rings around a person as they go out, sort of like dropping a pebble into the water. And you know what the effect is. There's a ring that comes off where the pebble drops in, and it just kind of rolls out. Now, I perceive the human unit that on all the lessons that it learns and all of the energy that it's putting out for whatever reason, it puts it out in this format. And so it's sort of like there's the action, sort of the stone dropping into the water, and there's the reaction, the ripples that come off the stone, the same too as the human body puts off. As above, so below. All you have to do is look for the patterns. As I observe this, I also observe that as a personality, I'm going to use myself as an example, and then you can build your own examples off of that. As a personality in the past, as I grew up, I used hurting myself as my safety valve. In other words, what I mean by that is if I thought that I had really screwed up bad and that I could balance it off easier on the planet, I would hurt myself in some way and endure the pain, and then when I endured enough pain, I felt that I was, pretty much forgiven of my sins, and that was my own personal trip. And so for me, I used breaking down my body as points of references. Finally, when I began my program on learning how to love oneself and not blaming oneself and to not suffer, I naturally had to change the programming that is within my body that said, break your body down, that breaks us even, and that makes us even. Because I didn't want to suffer anymore. Now, as I began to put that vibration out, I noticed that that thought form and that vibration was like dropping a new pebble into the water, and that there were waves that came from that. I noticed that as I really started to affirm that I was letting go of all of the karmic ties and things of that nature, and that, I saw different mathematical cycles or waves or things that I used to count on as points of reference, I noticed that I could dump different things. I could get rid of different things. I could get rid of massive amounts of karma at once. I also knew that in July and August I was working with different avenues of karma, plus and minus, the beauties of creation. And one of the things that I had noticed was a back in August that put me through some trauma before summer camp. Well, actually it was at the end of July. I noticed that I had hurt my back. Severely hurt it to the degree where the last time I hurt it like that, it crippled me out for, a while. And then what I said to myself is I can choose to break this pattern, and I choose to break all of these patterns at this time. And I noticed that instead of becoming crippled, the back hurt, but the universe provided some great help. It supported a couple different chiropractors, Arthur, who I love dearly, Fagenhalt. I think that's how you say Arthur's last name. And Chuck, who also works with and along with Arthur. And they did some chiropractic adjustment on me that really healed me almost completely of what normally would have been major trauma and drama in my life. And I thought to myself, wow, this is really great. In my head, for the first 15 minutes, I kept telling myself I will not continue in the old patterns. I choose to break the cycles. And lo and behold, I was able to break that cycle. The back stayed hurt for about 2 weeks, and then it repaired itself. I was excited that I had felt in myself that I had broke this cycle. Then when I was in Singapore, and I was kicking myself about not thinking that I was thinking about God enough, the thing that I created for myself was a bad back and the measles. Now, this is how I observe all of the things. I knew why I created the problems, because it's never outside of yourself. It's never the place, the things, the surroundings. They're just there to give you better insights to yourself. I also noticed that the measles were not 10 days, they were 3 days, which is sort of like less of a ripple than 10 days. You know what I mean? It's like when you drop the stone, the rippling effect goes out, but each ripple in turn gets smaller and with less speed and effect until it's calm and smooth and in harmony again. I perceive the changing in my life going from a bad back to a sore back in the month of July, August, and September, noticing that they all too were like a lot less intense. They didn't last nowhere near as long. And so what I saw several months ago or a year ago when I had the back surgery, and that was 2 years ago, tell myself this is the last of my suffering. And then I noticed a couple sore backs that were pretty intense, sort of like main ripples. And then the last one, which I managed to break, which was sort of like that little big push in between those smaller ripples where sort of like the tide would roll in and you get a little more of a forceful ripple off that. But I noticed that I stayed conscious of it and kept proclaiming that I was still not in the sacrifice, that even though the body was suffering once again, even though Dennis's God development side would say, hey, Dennis, this is your divinity. Why are you even suffering at all if you proclaim that there was no more suffering? I've observed that the true divinity doesn't really care what you're doing. And neither do you as the pure divinity. I've noticed that on the physical plane, sometimes we just work on programming cellular structure, which doesn't mean you cannot do it instantaneously. You just really haven't chosen to do it that way, because what you're doing is you're working on the normal flow, the perfect harmony that the universe produces. Sometimes something that we forget. We sometimes think that things should just automatically happen because we're really happening in the divinity. Well, if we think something should happen, we have a concept. And if we have the concept that something should happen, we have a concept of what God really is, which is a limiting thought. And apparently that's why we're having troubles to learn this, so that we can see what's going on. I have observed as the rolls of energy come out, and each time my physical body takes a look at it, it goes, yeah, but you're suffering less. You are seeing why you created this. So you're still following the harmony and the timing of the planet, the ripple effect. But I also notice that if I don't stay conscious of it in the rippling effect, when the wave finally kind of rolls out, or that ripple kind of rolls out, because I wasn't conscious enough to perceive it, I noticed that I dropped the pebble in the water again and produced the effect again, because it just shows up again in my life. This time, however, I have consciously noticed the ripple effect, and I'm not choosing to suffer anymore, and I'm doing the suffering that I'm doing by the pain with conscious explanation in my awareness that I'm willing to accept it in this moment in time, because I perceive it as diminishing. I'm also willing to accept its evolutionary state, because I'm willing to accept nature in its purest state, instead of just saying, well, because I'm divine and I'm Dennis and I'm self-realized, this should instantly disappear. I'm willing to understand the evolution and the timing. I'm willing to take the patience and the understanding in my humility, rather than commanding, sometimes in slipping out of that humble state and just expecting, like, well, why isn't it this way? When if I even have that attitude, I'm not in God. Because God would always go, hey, okay, I see you're into an angry mood, but goodness gracious, don't take it personally. And so I guess I'm on this first half of the tape, I'm just sort of sharing with you that I've noticed that we have effects. And let's just take suffering as one of the points of reference. All of a sudden we have suffering again when we say that we don't want suffering, and yet we're doing the divine work. How come we're suffering? It's our choice to suffer. Otherwise we would be doing something else. Also take a look at evolution and know that certain things have to be played out in evolution until your divinity is very, very clear that you just look and it should automatically change. That's when you know you're in clear divinity, because you also don't care what it changes into, because you have no concepts. Because as God, you have no attachments to anything. And then you get a clear look as how you're growing in your divinity and how you're growing in your evolution, noticing that the divine still isn't taking it personal, even though it is suffering a little bit. Instead of going into questioning, just go, oh, this is caused because, and if you don't find the cause, let it go. Sometimes the cause is easy to see, like, I was blaming myself for not being godlike. I mean, come on. Like, how does the space ever diminish itself inside of you? Unless you get caught in blame, and then you start worrying, and then you don't start trusting in yourself, and then, yeah, now for every action there's like an equal reaction. And so, because you totally chose to not see the divinity, and you totally chose to see the blame, even though your higher self knew that you were in perfect harmony, you chose to have a little repercussion to see if that's really what it was, and boom, sore back, and a little another smaller case of the measles, which is also a lot less of things that I was doing in evolution that I have done all my life in my growth. the letting go of painful things. It's becoming less painful. I repeated a lot of things in my life, a lot of drama, a lot of intensity. And so just to snap it clean, just because I'm self-realized of my divinity. That's helping Dennis, the personality, perceive the realities of evolution and the matter and the form and those things which we have attachments to. Within my self-realizations, I'm allowed to perceive all these things because your divinity is still keeping an overlook on all things and going, yeah, see, it looks like you're taking it personal right now. Your self-realized self will watch every millisecond as all of the things unravel themselves so that your self-realization of your divinity becomes so enlightening to you and so clear to you that you're not going into trauma anymore just because this may not be working or that may not be working. Even if it's like, well, some of us will go into the drama as we choose to grow of pretending we don't have enough money to even feed ourselves, and then we go into starvation panic, which is a basic scenario. You see, we try our basic things out. Well, what if I starve? Well, what if I don't have any money? Well, what if I don't think about God? Well, what if I, and notice that you're doing that and just be aware of that and just share with that rather than blame from that. And then when those little things do happen, you know what? It's repetition that you're getting out of it. So you start affirming those repetitions that you're getting out of it, and then life is becoming easier for you rather than, oh no, it's back again, what am I doing wrong? It's simply, oh wow, I see this. This is really good growth. I see the rippling effect. I'm beginning to understand time. I'm beginning to see what patience is all about. I'm beginning to see that even as a God being, I still must sometimes follow different evolutionary dramas and traumas that work out from, say, other lives or things that still need to be happening. One or two forgivenesses, if you're not using your forgive yourself, is not going to cover a whole lot in the repetition department. Rather than doing forgivenesses, I myself just keep repeating, I am worthy, I am worthy, I am worthy. And then when Dennis notices himself getting into blame, he goes, I love you, God, I love you, God, I love you, God. And then these things start pulling me back to my center. And as I come to my center, I notice that I was really there the whole time. And even though Dennis went through his pictures of living on this planet and following evolution, the higher self maintained, and then that strengthens your higher self. It strengthens you. It strengthens the personality. It strengthens it in ways that allow it to still be who it is and perhaps not get into blame. Now, I know that not all of us are into blame, and so that I'm only speaking to a few of you. But, we're not always into the subject material. And so just sort of pay attention to the other meanings that these stories have. I noticed that perhaps we're coming to the end of this tape. Oh yeah, always trust yourself even when you're into blame. Don't go for the negative complete of the whatever you're happening to kick yourself with. Matter is matter. Matter has that attraction. And it pulls all of us in. That's why we're here. But we're also still aware that we're totally working on our ascension because our divinity is within us. It's the still, silent voice. It's the still, silent voice that is saying, hey, wake up, things are happening, things are going on. I'm still and I'm still silent, but you know that you're feeling something and you notice that you're sensing something. So get into the divinity, get into the godness, get into the movement, get into the love, get into all of that. That was just me kind of bursting out in godness because the breeze and the beauty is so clean here, and it's so nice to share with you. The view is spectacular. So I can just take these last 2 minutes to give you some of the beauty. Remember, in one of those tapes, we were talking about our beauty as we see it out there. See the beauty around you. It will really enhance you. You will not feel so negative about yourself. You will see all those things that you need to be with and to glorify. The divinity that is in you is what needs to be felt and expressed and seen. The matter is great and it's exciting, but it's just the excitement that brings you into divinity. So I love you, and I will see you on the other side. Thank you.